And we fucking finally start recording, just hit the bitch.
I mean, so I'm sorry. We had some issues.
It literally just took us like fucking 20 minutes to set our shit up.
We were sitting here trying to figure out why the lights weren't flashing on our sound mixer, our beautiful piece of technology here.
Yeah, if you'll recall last week, Kenny said if the lights are on, then it's flashing. And we did our test recording and it sounded like shit. And I noticed that there are no flashing lights on the sound board because I am our tech department.
God help us.
And it wasn't working because the fucking power cord was laying on top of the sound bar, not plugged into the wall.
Not only was the power cord not
so
plugged in.
So we plugged the power cord in, still sounded like shit, but the lights were on. It's a fucking mystery. Whoop-de-doo, it wasn't plugged into the God-blessed USB outlet on the computer. Neither end of this fucking soundboard was plugged in, and for like 10 minutes we were like, what's wrong?
I just didn't know how to function.
I guess we have to quit podcasting.
I don't know how to podcast today.
Do not know how to podcast.
Cannot compute podcast shutting down.
Why is your podcast computer Russian? What's
Was
the deal
it Russian? I don't know.
It was a little
It
Russian.
should be Irish.
God damn it. No, you're not allowed to make it an Irish thing. The whole world's a Russian thing right now because of the World Cup.
Oh, yeah, there's that. We're not talking about that today, though.
They're playing some soccer and, you know, having some human atrocity and, yeah. How many, do you think that Google experienced an increase in people Googling what is makba?
I heard something about that, but then I didn't care enough to research. So if it were me, there would be no results.
What is makba? For all you Haunted Heart listeners who are wondering, that's how it's spelled in. That's how it's spelled in Cyrillic. So it's pronounced Moskva in Cyrillic, and it's Moscow for the one person who's listening who's like sheepish because they don't know what it means. Fuck. Who's that text from?
That was from our person in Russia.
Was it?
Yeah.
Our expert?
Yeah.
No, it's spelled Moskva in Cyrillic and is pronounced that way, but it is Moscow in English. Moscow. As everyone from our hometown said when I moved to Moscow for a while.
Well, I don't think they had ever even said the word Moscow.
Why you going over there to that Russia for? What you need over there in that
What they got over there that you can't get over here?
You gonna go over there and pet you a Russian bear? We got bears here. We got a black bear. We got a brown bear. You can go out west, get you grizzly bear. How did we get there?
That is so true though. Like, it's funny and it's true.
It's funny, but it's real because that's our heritage.
It is real. So
I don't even know how we got there, and that concludes our coverage on the World Cup. That's about all the fuck you'll get from us. I'm a budding hockey fan. I'm a budding hockey fan, and I was totally fucking into the chase for the cup because my Capitals, and also it's like here in our town, so that's kind of cool.
I don't know who this person is, by the way.
No, hockey is fucking awesome. Here's the thing. It's super hot, fucking burly ass, muscular dudes who are swift and deft on their feet because they're skating around on little teeny ice skates. But they're just fucking beating the shit out of each other and fucking wearing each other's skulls as crowns, and I'm just fucking about it. But I don't get that same feeling about soccer. So I don't have anything for you.
Well, what do we have today?
You have, don't you have a podcast you want to talk about?
I do. I do. So I just recently discovered a pretty cool podcast, and it kind of ties into our theme for this episode. So being that it is June and Pride Month, woo!
Hell yeah!
we have an LGBT-themed episode for you today. So, excited for that. But the podcast that I discovered is called Dead for Filth. Love the name. Mm-hmm. Absolutely love the name. Mm-hmm. And it's from the ooky spooky mind of horror personality and screenwriter Michael Varrati. And he essentially just talks about all things queer, horror, and beyond. Dead for Filth will bring you the best queer and horror icons out of the closet and into the night to talk about the genre they love. And I actually sat and binged on several episodes. He did one with Vander Von Odd from Dragula, which we're super into.
Yes. We love some Dragula.
And I didn't realize that Vander was actually a director. He directs horror films too. Huh.
That makes sense though.
Yes. And so I was listening to this episode and they mentioned one of his short films that he produced that is available on YouTube to watch. I highly recommend everyone immediately. I don't give a shit if you pause this podcast right now. Pause it. Go on YouTube, search up Tres Versos, Tresversos, 3 verses. Search it on YouTube. It is an amazing horror short. It's 13 minutes, and I sat there and I was like, I clutched my pearls a little bit.
Why the fuck is this the first I'm hearing about this?
I don't know. I had no clue. No clue. And apparently he's actually directing a feature-length film.
Really?
That's in the works for him. So I'm really excited for it. Just having seen a taste of this, it was very artfully done. And it just really it definitely stands out as one of my favorite horror shorts.
Huh.
So
we have to watch that.
Yeah, I wanted to actually get you to watch it before we recorded, but forgot.
No, great.
But good. Completely forgot.
Awesome.
But yeah, I'm going to show it to you.
Okay.
It's amazing. So yes, definitely go check out Dead for Filth. If that's what you're into, which it should be because you're into us.
Right. Yeah.
So
true. If you hear about that podcast and you're like, no, it's not for me. I'm just not really interested. You're probably not going to be interested in this episode, babe, because we are talking queers.
Yes.
Steers. And horror.
Yes.
Did it work? I don't think it worked.
Is that you trying to title this episode?
Maybe. Maybe. Hey, well, no, there's not really. Yeah, I don't think we have any steers. Maybe I could find some cow facts and just put it in there.
Cow facts.
I'll just every so often interrupt with a cow fact.
How now, brown cow?
How now, brown cow? And then there'll be a tone. From? There'll be a fucking tone, and then I'll just share a bovine-related fact.
What was that from? What was How Now, Brown Cow from?
Was it from a kid's book? Or rhyme?
I thought it was supposed to, teach you something.
How Now, Brown Cow? I don't think so.
I don't know.
I mean, I'm interested enough to look it up.
How now, brown cow? So, yes, that's kind of our episode right now.
I'm fucking looking it up.
Well, I just didn't know. You were taking a long time. I didn't want there to be awkward silence.
In teaching elocution, it dates back to at least 1926. Although not in use today, the phrase "how now" is a greeting. I don't think it's from any. I think it's to teach
how to enunciate.
Yeah,
not.
It's red leather, yellow leather. Red leather, yellow leather. Red leather, yellow leather.
That's really scary, actually.
The scariest.
I want to write a short horror film called
Red Leather, Yellow Leather.
Yeah,
we should. We could do a series, and we could call another one "Unique New York." That's the one that I always struggled with.
Unique New York.
Unique New York. And the long version is, New York, you need New York, you need unique New York.
What if the short film was Hellraiser inspired, except instead of Cenobites coming forth, you just had people or these weird entities that say these phrases? So you have
English grammar teachers.
English grammar teachers.
We're stuck in a loop.
Forth. How now, brown cow?
I mean, that kind of sounds fucking terrifying.
You're welcome. That's talent.
Let's just make it happen.
So, but yes, definitely go check out that podcast. Absolutely love it. Another thing that I'm really excited for, being on topic, you actually mentioned this to me. I think you tagged me or something in The Quiet Room.
Yes.
It's the film with Alaska Thunderfuck in it.
Yes.
And I watched the trailer for that, and I really want to see it.
Yeah.
It looks phenomenal.
Me too, actually. I love Alaska, so I will eat whatever shit that bitch turns out.
Yeah, so, like, the premise is, like, you have this guy, Michael, after a failed suicide attempt, reluctantly begins to make friends in the psych ward, where he wakes up. And fellow patients, Hunter, Joe, and Rachel, explain the hospital's urban legend. A malevolent entity named Hattie haunts their halls.
That is, so my on my witch playlist, on every single witchy playlist I've ever made, my song, my theme, if you will, is called Backwater Hattie.
Backwater Hattie.
I think it's actually called Swamp Witch, but like the song is about, oh, Hattie lived back in the swamp, and like it's like essentially a story about a swamp witch, and the town gets sick and she helps them, and then they're like, oh my god, she helped us. Like in the beginning they think she's weird, but then after she saves them all from dying of some disease or whatever with a potion, they're like, let's go thank her. And these two guys go into the wilderness to find her to thank her. And spoiler alert, they never fucking came back. And she left a note that was like, don't you ever fucking try to find me. Which I just received so much. Like, I'm going to help you, but stay the fuck away from me.
Don't you ever try to find me.
Don't you ever come and find me again.
I receive it too, man.
It's beautiful. Anyway, Hattie.
Yes,
Deep
Hattie.
connection with that.
So apparently, you know, this Hattie entity haunts this hospital, and Michael apparently becomes her next target. But what I really like is I'm just reading from the website that it's really it tackles like issues of mental health. And, you know, how oftentimes in film, particularly the horror genre, people suffering from mental illness are misrepresented or villainized. And the story just sort of features an unlikely group of outcasts sort of coming together to overcome Hattie. And so it becomes like an opportunity to externalize a struggle that is internal by nature and show that there is hope even in the darkest of places. So
that actually sounds really cool.
Yeah, I mean, and it's really, I mean, it's true if you think about it. Like, a lot of the times, if, you know, mental illness is always often represented as the villain. So I think, you know, having that as, like, you know, that's your main, like, I guess, protagonist, I should say. I just think it's different. Yeah. And it's, you know, something that's a very lofty
goal. I'll be interested to watch the movie to see if it meets that goal.
And it looked good. Like, the quality of the film looked really good too.
Oh,
like, like through the trailer, like it didn't look like
it didn't
campy
look like it was filmed on an iPhone.
Or like no, it didn't. It actually looked like really good. And from what I saw of like Alaska's like makeup, she looked fucking terrifying. So really excited to see that. But that just sort of takes us into the meat of what I am talking about.
The steer meat, perhaps?
The steer meat, yes. Is what does it mean to be queer and be into horror? Where do we fit into this space? And this is a subject of which I am particularly versed with, obviously. And I have come across that a lot of people within the horror community that will say, oh, well, why should it matter who a person fucks? They're all getting cut up.
Yeah.
But in the history of horror, you have this oversaturation of heterosexual energy that is thrust on you. So that's why I get so confused when I hear people say that sexuality shouldn't matter. I'm like, I don't know. To me, it just seems to be like what they really mean to say is like queer sexuality doesn't matter. Like, you didn't have a problem with like in the 80s with all of these fucking jocks and cheerleaders getting it on, but now all of a sudden like you have gay sex or queer, you know, sexuality in play. Now all of a sudden it's like, I don't want to see that. Or like it shouldn't matter.
Are there people who feel that way though?
Yes.
I guess I'm just so removed from people.
Yes.
Like,
no, there are people who feel that way. I feel like
someone would say something like that and I would just like wordlessly get up and leave.
No, like, there are people. No, I have read numerous comments. Like even even on iHorror.com, they did or are doing a series for Pride Month on horror,
which is awesome.
And literally all of the the majority of the comments are just filled with people that's like, why should this matter? Why should this? It's just horror. Like, yes, so it is still in 2018 very, very present.
I mean, I guess I'm so far, because initially when you said that, like, I kind of agree with you, but from way on the other side of that argument, you know what I mean? Like, I guess it doesn't, like, obviously I want more queer representation in the horror space, and I totally get that it has been driven by a very heterosexual energy for such a long time, but it's like I would love for us to get to a place of equality where we could say from a place of equality that it doesn't matter who someone has sex with because they're all getting cut up anyway. You know what I mean?
Right.
Does that make sense? Like, I would like for us to be in a place where it actually is equal,
right,
so that we could then say that.
And then, but we would get there by having that representation,
right?
Because once you get that representation, then it becomes,
right.
Then it becomes, oh, who gives a fuck? Because
right.
everybody's getting cut up. You know what
right.
I mean? It's not just, oh, you have that one token gay,
right.
He gets cut up and he's gone. Yeah. You know what I mean? So, like, I think by adding more more representation into that, then it becomes more of an equal playing ground as opposed to, not.
Mm-hmm.
So,
but I've always been that way. I would love for there not to even have to be a Pride Month, because every month is Pride Month. You know what I mean?
You should be prideful of yourself.
Like, always.
Always.
Fucking always.
But, and at the same time, this is interesting to me because you have people that feel this way that are fans in the horror community, but I don't know. It's like we have a lot of like really cool, gay, lesbian, transgender, bisexual people that are creating amazing things in horror. So, like, without these people, you wouldn't have like some of the great content that you have. Clive Barker, amazing LGBT icon in the horror community. And as I was researching, I actually found this out. He faced some pushback in the original Hellraiser film during a scene where Frank and Julia were supposed to have anal sex, but was changed to something, quote unquote, more appropriate. And I'm like,
it's Hellraiser though, babe.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? Who's to say what's appropriate?
Yeah, like incestuous desires, that's okay.
That's fine.
Adultery, murder, S&M clad demons from hell.
That's fine.
Ripping you to shreds. That's fine, but do not show the butt sex.
You better not touch the butthole.
Do not show the butt sex. And I'm like, that just like
don't touch
floored me because of how that film, how just immensely dark that film is. Yeah. And like, oh, but the butt sex is where we draw the line.
Absolutely.
I'm like,
that's it. Nope.
What?
Actually, it has to be a circle because you can't approach it from any angle.
Right.
You have to draw the circle.
Right. But that's how I feel like we head down like this dangerous path of erasing your identity. Like I get the feeling that like that should not be like, you should have multiple facets that make you who you are. Yes. Right. But it's still a part of you.
Right.
Right. So it should still be represented.
Yeah.
It's like with me, like I probably don't initially read as a gay man.
Well, everybody always thinks we're married anyway.
Yeah. But like I would never want, like it's still a part of me.
Yeah.
And I still love that part of me. And I wouldn't change it.
Right.
And I wouldn't have anybody take it away.
Yeah.
Just as I'm sure you would feel the same way about, your femininity. You know what I mean? Like, it's not the main thing, but it's something that is a part of you, and I feel like it should all still be represented and still be loved and still be approached in an equal way.
I think that's an important message to what you were saying about how your personality should have lots of different facets. And I think it's really hard a lot of times for people who are kind of just coming into their identity as part of the LGBTQ community. I think there is a sort of a temptation to, because you do feel like you've, depending on what your experience has been, a lot of people feel like they have been somewhat oppressed and they have kind of had to compartmentalize that part of their personality and put it away. And so it like that becomes their whole identity, right?
Yeah.
And there's a fine line between you definitely, I think in this space, in the horror space, I think we should be highlighting our LGBTQ talent there. And that's why I really love what iHorror is doing with kind of shining a spotlight on that, but in a way that doesn't reduce their entire personality and their contributions to, well, this is a gay horror filmmaker, and that's it. And like, here's 8 gay horror filmmakers. Like, instead, I would love it to be like, and I think iHorror is doing a good job of this, where, you know, the spotlight is like, this person may work in a totally different way than this other person.
Right.
And so I think that is important. Shining a spotlight without whitewashing everything.
Yeah.
You know.
And I think it's definitely something to be said. Like, I think it also goes back to, like, being that, that token gay. Like, if you have, like, that token anyone.
Right.
But, like, in this context, like, a token gay, like, you know, sort of prescribe them a stereotype, and then they get killed away.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I mean, speaking
speaking
on behalf of the slut community, I love a token slut. No one loves the token slut like me in a horror film. It's fantastic.
Right? So, I don't know. I just feel like, again, it just goes back to that. And, like, if we could just have more, flesh these people out more and give them more and flesh them out. I think once you know, you just put someone in just to put them in there for, you know, whatever.
Representation.
For representation.
Yeah.
Then, you know, it's very one note and you care less. You know what I mean?
And I want to hear about it when it's not June, too. Also.
Right.
Like, can we just have...
Did you ever see the movie Paranorman? Have you heard of Paranorman?
Yes.
I've never seen it, but apparently there's a character in there who is gay, which surprised me because this is like an animated, like, I thought it was like a kids movie.
I don't think it's like a kids movie. It's like
one of those like animated, like,
young
adult movies.
Yeah. It's a kids movie the same way that like Coraline was a kids movie.
Yeah. And so you have this character who's like this really big, butchy, like, jock. And then it's just casually, like, he just casually is like, oh, well, me and my boyfriend are this. Like, we will be back. And it's just like...
fucking amazing.
You know what I mean?
And it's low-key.
And
just totally...
It's not...
Fucking love it.
He's not being, you know... What's the word I'm looking for?
He's not patronizing.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
I love that. It's almost like real life, would you say?
Exactly. And so, again, it just all goes back to, like, if we're stuck in that rut, that's just really bad storytelling. You know what I mean? Like, it's just bad storytelling. Yeah. Like, if you can't think of anything else for this person to be other than,
gay.
You know, a gay or a slut or this or that. And while we do love
a token slut.
And while we do, and also like our B horror movies, like people that are just there to like, you know, our tropes. We love our tropes.
Yes.
Still.
I think it would further I think your point is that it would further the genre.
Yeah.
To also to maybe not play into that stereotype and that trope all the time. Or to maybe do what smart films like Scream have done and kind of turn that on its head.
Yes.
Because Rose McGowan in Scream is the slut trope, right? But she's like the smartest one out of the group. Except for Sadie.
Really?
No.
She tried to escape through a cat door, bitch.
No, but she's like, I mean, the fuck else was she gonna go, babe? She almost had it. It was fine.
She tried to escape through a cat door.
No, I mean, she did play her trope sometimes, but other times, like, she was, like, very level-headed. If you watch that movie, like, she talks, she's made up, like, the trope, right? And she speaks a little bit like the trope, but she's cleverer than you think. Cleverer than her trope, and that's the point, right? Because that movie was kind of trying to comment on its own structure.
Yeah. So, getting back on track.
What are we talking about?
Yeah, so no, it just goes back to, like I said, it's just, like, it leads to really bad storytelling. And like we mentioned earlier, like, a lot of the times...
The lack of queer representation leads to very bad storytelling.
Yeah. And it...
Nouns. We need
Nouns,
them sometimes.
words, phrases, use them.
How now, brown cow?
How now, brown cow? That should be the name of the episode.
Fucking haunting you.
That should be the name of the episode.
Let's do it.
How now, brown cow?
What is this episode about?
Whatever the fuck we want it to be about.
What I appreciate is that even though I wore a dress today, it now has rode up to the point that it seems like I'm wearing a shirt with no pants.
It looks like one of my shirts that you would find in a drawer of mine.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
No matter what the length, this is my podcasting true form.
True. So yes, going back to the fact that, like, a lot of the times they're either, they have a meaningless death, or they're the villains, and when they are the villains, it's oftentimes a result of their identity. So, I mean, if you even think about, like, Buffalo Bill, Norman Bates, both, an example of that. And while I love those characters, there is something to be said about what that sort of normalcy programs into the audience, specifically those who, may be more prone to, like, committing a hate crime or being more violent. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think the problem is, right, that's all that you see. Like, those characters aren't a problem, and I don't think that's what you're saying.
No, they're not.
But it's just, we don't see the opposite side of the coin where you see a healthy transgender person who is the protagonist of the story. Right. But, there's no problem with trotting out Buffalo Bill.
No. I love Buffalo Bill. I mean... it is what it is. I can relate.
But it's almost like that flavor, the is only used for, I don't know, like enhancing somebody's mental instability or enhancing someone's, like, strangeness or what, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Kind of like what you were talking about with the Quiet Room.
That's what I'm saying. Like, that's why I think that it's, like, it's nice, it's fresh, and I'm just really interested to see someone else's take on, on that, because, like I said, I mean, that does tend to be, like, the norm for, the person who may be LGBTQ or they have mental illness to be villainized if they're not being killed off. Right. I mean, even if, like, this is a whole other topic, but, like, even if you think about Split, which love it.
Love that fucking
But,
movie.
I mean, it still follows that same idea. Even though it kind of breaks it up a little bit because, like, you have his other character, like, his other personalities who, like, help out.
Yeah.
Like, or I guess his true self helps out, but again, like I said, it still just sort of plays into that idea. Still love the movie. It's still fan-fucking-tastic. But it still follows that formula. So, I think
the issue is we want, what the gist seems to be is that we want more variation, for the roles written for and occupied by queer identities.
Yeah. And despite all that, though, a lot of the times queer people still relate to the villains and they identify with them. If you look
I certainly do.
I certainly do. But if you look at, like, last year, do you remember, like, when the whole Babadook craze happened?
Yeah.
That's a prime example. So that started out as, like, on Tumblr, someone made a comment and was like, whenever someone says the Babadook isn't openly gay, it's like, did you even watch the movie? The post drew to close to 100,000 responses. And it sort of had that dialogue back and forth between users, and you'd have people that complain, well, it was just a movie. And then someone would say, oh, a movie about a gay man who just wants to live his life in a small Australian suburb. And it may be just a movie to you, but to the LGBT community, the Babadook is a symbol of our journey. That was a quote. That was a comment as a response to the original post.
Do you agree?
I would get into that. So then from there, Netflix added it to their LGBT section. Great marketing, by the way. Netflix. Great marketing. And then that just really solidified it as an icon. And while that might be all jokes and fun, I mean, there is a darker layer to that humor. So in the film, if you haven't watched it, the Babadook was a metaphor for this woman's immense grief and depression after the death of her husband, which sort of culminates in the Babadook possessing her. And at the end, she finds that she can never really get rid of the Babadook. She can only quell it by feeding it dirt and earthworms in the darkest corner of their basement. So you can sort of see how parallels can be drawn, especially considering you have this just like darkness that you feel. It's coming out of the closet, coming out of the shadows. So I can see how, people in the community can relate to that. And I will go into my own personal experience, but first I want to even also mention like this, the whole thing with the Babadook even goes further back to one of the most iconic monsters of all time, in Frankenstein. James Whale directed this film, who was also an openly gay man in the 1930s, which was virtually unheard of.
Right.
Props to him. Didn't give any fucks. But even then, you can see the relation between the monster and queerness. You have this monster spurned by his father, chased by villagers, and never really fully understood. You have themes of repressed sexuality in Frankenstein, as the monster could be seen as a literal interpretation of the doctor's own sexuality. It could be drawn as an example of what it means to be transgender even. There are many interpretations that we can get from this, but that's what makes horror so relatable for some of us. I know for me, I related to the monsters because I felt like I understood them. There comes a time when you're figuring everything out, that you realize there's something different about you, and you're sitting at the dinner table, or you're with friends, and you hear someone say that phobic comment, and from that moment on, it's like a force comes in and displaces you. For me, it was like I was pushed into this fragile, like black and white world where I was now outside looking in, almost like in The Further. And the door was there, but I was too afraid to open it because I didn't know who I would be stepping out as. What if I stepped out of the shadows as a monster to the people that I love? So I took comfort in horror, and I befriended those monsters that I felt like I shared a world with. And I definitely contribute horror for giving me the confidence to come out of that space, because I realized that, bitch, I liked being different. Mm-hmm. I like being different. And by no means am I advocating violence when I say this, but that prom scene in Carrie has always been a profound moment for me in reference to coming out. Mm-hmm. Like, at some point, you just burn everything to the ground and step out into the world as this changed being. It's literally almost like a rebirth. So I've always and that's one of the first movies that I was in, that's one of the first movies that introduced me to horror. Was Carrie. I think it was literally
classical education.
It really was. It was Halloween, Child's Play, Carrie. Those were my three, and Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Cannot forget that. Those were my four, those are the earliest films that I could remember watching. And still to this day, that moment, in Carrie, where she just gets ththose fucking crazy eyes and then just fucking burns everything down. Mm-hmm. I relate to that. I related to that so much, especially in high school, because I was so quiet for the most of my time. And then something happened, in my senior year, where I was like, fuck it. I don't care. I want to join this drama club. I want to act in this play. I'm going to do it. Because prior to that, I'd been so like deathly afraid of doing any of that.
And that's when you met me.
And that's when I met you.
And your whole life changed.
And it changed forever.
And here we are not plugging our shit in.
And here we are.
Trying to ramshackle our lives together.
To this very day.
Then you met you a fellow monster of yo.
A monster. It's a lie.
Then you met your bride of Frankenstein. Oh my God. It really is.
Frankenstein and
what a
Bride of
blessing. That's why we have matching socks. We really do.
My fucking cat tore a hole in mine.
Yeah. We have to order new ones.
Yeah, we do. We really do. So that was my
Donate to our Patreon. No,
yes.
I'm kidding.
Yes.
I'm kidding.
So that was my little moment on like being queer and into horror and just sort of like what we need to do to like make this a better space, because we all love horror for our own individual reasons and we just want it to be better. Because like we get shit on a lot of the times from all of the other genres.
Oh yeah. And
like I like being the underdog. Mm-hmm. Don't get me wrong, but we have some brilliant fucking minds in this genre. Yeah. And I just want it to be out. I want it to be better. I want fleshed out characters.
Yeah.
I want shit that is relatable.
Mm-hmm.
And I want you to make me feel something. I want to care for these characters. So that way it hurts when they're fucking sliced up.
Yeah. I want smart horror. Fleshed out characters, yeah. But I love a plot.
Yeah.
I will always choose a plot.
You're more into
over
a
character.
To the like the what
the
am I
structure,
trying to say? The structure of it. I want more of the emotion into it.
Yeah. And we're different that way.
Yeah.
But I think,
because you know how emotional I can get in a fucking movie. Like a movie can be fucking shit, but like if I get attached to these fucking characters, I am moved. I am like
so moved.
Literally moved. And Katie's like,
call the fucking trucks, babe, because you moving.
Katie judges me when I get into that space.
Just a little. Fine. Sometimes I can get that way too, though. Sometimes you can get me, but I like structures. I like it when people play with the structure of things.
She likes it when they like fucking turn one on her and like she like fucking it's like she's been bested.
Ooh. I'll do my
Katie wants you to best her.
My quiet with my hand to my
clutch
chest.
Your pearls, clutch your pearls.
I think the last movie that did that for me, I know I'm leaving something out, but I think the last movie that did that for me was You're Next.
Yeah, and that didn't do a whole lot for me.
They did a really good job. Yeah.
I still love it. It's a great film, but it didn't do a whole lot for me. But and that's how that's why we are fleshed out human beings.
Exactly.
Here we are.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Awesome. All right. So, are we ready to descend into the world of true criminess?
True crime.
Into True Crime Corner?
Did you say true crime? Yes, I did.
Well, yes, I did.
Said the killer.
So, it's been a while since I covered a case.
It really has. What the fuck is up, man?
It's been a minute. I mean, I've been talking about demon possession and Ouija boards.
We have been getting more into the spiritual side of things.
For sure. I've been running with the demons. So, I figured that we would bring it back to good old-fashioned true crime this week. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, there is a plethora of material available on people who were murdered because they were gay. And I didn't want to talk about that because there are tons and tons and tons of stories, unfortunately, of ignorant shit like that. So I wanted to find, initially, when I started researching, I wanted to find a case where the assailant was somehow connected to the LGBTQ scene, right? Unfortunately, when I began my research for that, I got back a lot of terrible search results that were horribly homophobic and awful.
Oh.
So,
see, I thought you were going to say you got back some like kinky porn or something.
No. I mean, I wish that I had gotten that back, but instead I got like terrible things like the 10 most evil homosexuals ever.
Number 1, me.
Myself.
Me, myself, and the devil.
And it's just you wearing like the costumey horns.
Quote the Alyssa Edwards tongue pop.
So that wasn't going to work either. And I was like, well, I'm not going to do that. So it was about that time, and I don't actually know how I stumbled across it, but I stumbled across this really interesting article who I have to give her props. There was a very fascinating article in The Guardian written by Julie Bindel, Bindel. And it's about new evidence in the Matthew Shepard case.
New evidence.
Yes.
Interesting. Side note, I actually, community, forgive me, but I actually don't know a whole lot about this case.
And I think a lot of people don't. Certainly not from the angle that I'm going to look at it today. So we're gonna put our true crimey thinking hats on, and we're gonna kind of look at this case. We're gonna come to it fresh. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So obviously, it's a huge deal.
Mm-hmm.
The Matthew Shepard case inspired the Laramie Project. It happened in 1998. The Laramie Project was written in the year 2000, and it toured worldwide. It also inspired the Matthew Shepard Act, which our boy Obama passed in 2009, and that it made hate crimes, that kind of created the language in the law for hate crimes.
Right.
And defined what that is. And it really just brought attention to the rest of the world to bring awareness to the fact that hate crimes against LGBTQ people were real and that they actually did happen.
Right.
It certainly wasn't the first, and it certainly wasn't the last, but it kind of became elevated and kind of became known as like the case that brought attention to this issue finally. Mm-hmm. But my question today is whether this case is really what we've all been led to believe.
Interesting.
So in 2013, this is kind of what inspired me to cover this case this week. In 2013, a journalist, he's actually an award-winning journalist, Stephen Jimenez, published his book on the Matthew Shepard case, which is called The Book of Matt, Hidden Truths About the Murder of Matthew Shepard. Jimenez spent 13 years interviewing more than 100 people who had a connection to the case, and he got a huge critical response for this book. Some of it was praise, a lot of it was hate, and a lot of the hate was from the LGBTQ community.
Okay.
Jimenez has a very different take on the Shepard case, and one that is perhaps not as black and white as we might think.
Okay. I'm interested.
So, let's examine the case itself, right? Because a lot of people know its significance, but not a lot of people know the details.
Right.
So, Matthew Shepard was born in 1976. He was born in Casper, Wyoming, into a really affluent family. He had a slight frame. He was 5'2", with blonde hair and braces, and he was always kind of small, thin, short for his whole life.
Okay.
He lived in Saudi Arabia and Switzerland, and he seemed to move around a whole lot due to his father's job. He took German and Italian language courses, and by the time he started college, he could speak 3 different languages.
Sweet.
So super intelligent. And he also seemed to be a really sweet, genuine guy. He was described as, quote, an optimistic and accepting young man who had a special gift of relating to almost anyone. He was the type of person who was very approachable and always looked to new challenges. Matthew had a great passion for equality and always stood up for the acceptance of people's differences. So he seems like a chill-ass dude, right?
Right.
Like
I would assume so.
him.
Yeah, totally.
So when he was around 19, the Shepard family moved to Denver, Colorado for a brief stint. After they had been in Switzerland and Saudi Arabia, they came to Denver, and It was around 1995. And in February of 1995, he went on a school trip to Morocco, and he was actually beaten and raped while he was in Morocco.
Okay.
Yes. So that experience led to some issues with depression and panic attacks. There wasn't really anything in the research that I saw that mentioned PTSD specifically, but I wouldn't be surprised.
No, not at all.
We didn't really diagnose PTSD on any large scale within civilians in the 90s. So, however, multiple times he was hospitalized due to clinical depression and suicidal ideation. And it's been said that the Morocco attack is what may have triggered Matthew's foray into drugs. Unfortunately, right around the time that the Shepard family moved to Denver in the mid-90s, Denver was experiencing a huge surge in methamphetamine usage. Mm-hmm. And this created kind of the perfect storm of, you have this person who's gone through this horrible, horrible experience, who has all of these issues with depression, and then you also have this surge in methamphetamine usage. And unfortunately, from the research, it seems that Matthew kind of found his way into that and began using methamphetamine rather heavily. Denver actually still has a huge issue with methamphetamines. Usage nearly tripled in 2017 compared to 2013.
Shit.
So it's still a problem. And it is almost 20 years later.
Yeah.
Well, over 20 years later.
Yeah.
So this is where people start to get a little itchy, right? Because we have a certain idea of this crime and we have an idea of this victim that's been presented to us. And this is maybe not starting to gel so well. All of this is based on research. Stephen Jimenez, who wrote the Book of Matt, alleges in his book that Matthew was addicted to and also dealing crystal meth, and that he had dabbled in heroin. He also took significant sexual risks, and he was allegedly being pimped alongside Aaron McKinney, you'll learn about him in a bit, with whom he'd also had occasional sexual encounters. He was HIV positive at the time of his death, and Matthew's drug abuse and the fact that he knew one of his killers prior to the attack, we'll learn more about that in a minute too, was never explored in court. Neither was the rumor.
These are all facts?
These are all facts.
So, like, blood tests, like, he had methamphetamines in his system and, like, all of that? Or
that, and also, like, there were years of methamphetamine, because the crime didn't occur until 1998.
Right.
Right, and the methamphetamine started in 1995.
Okay.
So there were years that led up to how we got, like, obviously you don't, I think everybody, well, hopefully everybody hasn't had experiences that teach you those things, but you don't, like, try drugs one day and then the next day you're completely addicted and have nothing else in your life. Like, it takes a while to get there. And that's not where I'm saying that Matthew was, by the way, but I'm just saying that that was a factor that maybe a lot of people haven't heard about.
Okay.
So getting into the crime itself, now that we've learned a bit about Matthew, October 6th, 1998, Matthew is 21 years old, and he's a poli-sci major in his freshman year at Laramie University. And he went to Fireside Bar, which is an openly gay-friendly bar, which surprises some people. Laramie is actually pretty liberal compared to the rest of Wyoming. So, we have to take it with a grain of salt because it is fucking Wyoming, but it is the most liberal town in Wyoming, and this might be because the University of Wyoming is the #1 employer. So there are actually a lot of educated people in this town, and there was a thriving, albeit close-knit, gay community. Yeah. That existed.
That what often happens in small towns.
Right.
Like, even with where, we're from.
Right.
Like, it's very close. It's very, like, tight-knit. Yeah.
So I think it's important to keep facts like that in mind, because it's not like, it's so easy to see it as, like, us and them. And that, like, that these people were constantly victimized in this town. And that's not necessarily true. They were part of the fabric of how the town operated, right? And people acknowledge that. So Matthew goes to Fireside Bar. Russell Henderson and Aaron McKinney also arrive a bit later at Fireside as well. They chatted with Matthew before they all loaded up in a truck belonging to Aaron McKinney's father. In the truck, and this is a trigger warning for those of you who are don't want to hear the details of these things, you might want to skip ahead like 15 seconds, 30 seconds. In the truck, Russell and Aaron took Matthew's wallet, keys, and shoes and beat him. Henderson and McKinney then removed Matthew from the truck, pistol whipped him 18 times in the head with a .357 Magnum, and repeatedly kicked him in the genitals. Then they tied him to a fence, set a fire, and left him unconscious in the near freezing weather. Matthew was found by Aaron Kreffels. He was a student who was riding his bike 15 hours later. He at first mistook Matthew's body for a scarecrow.
Oh my God.
Yeah. He didn't realize it was a person at first. But Matthew was still alive, although barely. Russell Henderson was apprehended by the police shortly after the crime happened. It was just a few hours after leaving Matthew. He and Aaron McKinney had headed in the direction of Matthew's house, but they got distracted when they ran into some other acquaintances of theirs, Emiliano Morales and Jeremy Herrera. And apparently Herrera and Morales were slashing tires for fun, as one does in Wyoming.
Wow.
On a Friday night.
Kind of like us in cow tipping.
So they were slashing tires, and Russell Henderson and Aaron McKinney decided to stop and also slash tires. And then apparently an altercation ensued between McKinney and Morales, and Aaron McKinney actually cracked Morales' head open with the same .357 Magnum that he'd beaten Matthew with.
So let me get this straight. So you have a couple guys who are slashing tires.
Yep.
And then two more guys come in who they're like, no. And they're like, oh, let's slash tires too. And then they
just fucking slash tires together.
Until
one of them pisses off the other one.
You slashed my tire.
Yes.
And then that's happens.
How I'm imagining it. Yep.
Yeah, great.
Regardless, though, as a result of that scuffle, the police were dispatched, and police officer Flint Waters, who sounds like he's fucking made up. Like, that does not... Flint Waters? Like,
Flint.
He sounds like he's like the hero of some, like, romance novel.
No. Can I just say this? Flint, Michigan.
Flint, Michigan.
Flint Waters.
Flint Waters. Yeah, I get it. I'm with you. Anyway... Police officer Flint Waters is who arrives at the scene of the scuffle between McKinney and Morales, and he arrests Russell Henderson. At that point in time, Flint Waters found the truck, the gun, Matthew's shoes, and his credit card. So they know something's up. Right? McKinney is arrested later, obviously, but Matthew's friends, Walt Bolden and Alex Trout, rushed to the hospital as soon as they had heard about his attack. That same day, they contacted the Associated Press and a couple local LGBTQ organizations. The same day as Matthew was taken to the hospital. It was at that time that Walt Bolden linked the attack to Wyoming legislature's failure to pass a hate crimes bill. And he also said that the assault was identified as a hate crime by a policeman at the scene, and that actually was not the case. But that's kind of how that started that ball rolling, right?
Okay, yeah.
On October 12th of 1998, Matthew Shepard succumbed to his injuries and passed away as a result of the injuries sustained at the hands of Russell Henderson and Aaron McKinney. On October 14th, a celebrity vigil was held for Matthew on the steps of the U.S. Capitol. It was attended by Ted Kennedy and Ellen DeGeneres. Elton John sent flowers. Barbara Streisand phoned the Albany County Sheriff's Office to demand action on the case. Like, it was crazy. It was huge. Madonna called in an assistant.
Fuck.
Yes. Madonna called the university.
All of the...
Laramie University.
The queer gods and goddesses descended upon earth.
And President Clinton told... Who was obviously president at the time.
Really, Katie? Really? President Clinton was president.
President Clinton told
what you say when you need to fill your word count up.
President Clinton told journalists at the White House that day, quote, "In our shock and grief, one thing must remain clear. Hate and prejudice are not American values." Matthew's funeral was attended by more than 1,000 mourners. And it was also boycotted by Westboro Baptist Church.
Oh, I'm not even mentioning them. Who?
Who?
Don't know her.
So, obviously, this became a huge milestone. I don't want to call it a milestone, but it became a huge...
Catalyst?
Yeah, catalyst for action against LGBTQ hate crimes, which is awesome.
Right.
However, Stephen Jimenez's research suggests a different story. So both Russell Henderson and Aaron McKinney, who were the murderers, had rough home lives. Henderson's mother was a chronic alcoholic who had been repeatedly beaten by his father, and McKinney spent much of his childhood alone, left by his mother with his grandparents, who locked him in the basement to keep him out of trouble. You know, if you really want to raise a really well-rounded child, just lock them in the dark, cold, damp basement. That'll make them really normal, I find.
I mean, I think so.
Just lock them in there. Maybe don't feed them too often.
No, don't feed them any.
You know, tell them they're worthless. That's good. It's good raising.
Yeah.
Be tough with them. Spare the rod, spoil the child.
Tough love.
So they had come from rough backgrounds. However, in fact, far from being homophobic gay bashers, it's alleged that both Aaron McKinney and Russell Henderson were no strangers to Laramie's gay population. Kathleen Johnson, who this lady is you.
Is me?
Maybe. This
I'm
lady
a Kathleen,
is like Wyoming version of you.
So if I was in Wyoming,
small town
I would
version
be
of you.
Kathleen. Well, I guess
Maybe.
Kenny. So that translates to Kathleen.
So Kathleen Johnson is the former owner of Laramie's antique store, Granny's Attic. So she's running Granny's Attic. And
All right, Granny's
And I
Attic.
imagine that Kathleen Johnson is just like watching everybody in the community.
Oh,
like
yes, she is. I can guarantee you. If she's like me, honey, she knows everybody's secrets.
Granny's
She's looking
Attic is
around.
on the main stretch. I have no idea where it is, but in my mind, it's on the main stretch, and she just sits out on the porch and just watches everybody's comings and goings.
Granny's Attic is a front.
She knows who you dating. She knows everybody.
Because she collects she collects all of your shit.
She does.
And learns about all of you.
So Kathleen Johnson said of Russell Henderson, Russell used to hang around with gay people. That's a direct quote. Quote, Laramie had a big gay population. I knew what people's sexual orientation was because my best friend's son was gay.
Oh, great.
I saw them hanging around with Russell. End
Great.
quote.
Okay.
And I don't want to feed into like, oh, well, because Russell was near gay people, then that means he was gay. But what I'm trying to do is dispel the myth that has been built that, you know, these were two guys who had no idea who Matthew Shepard was, and they were down home, gay-hating, white bread boys who like had no concept of the community. It's clear that they did because they were part of it.
Right.
Doesn't necessarily mean they were gay. However, over a dozen sources identified in Jimenez's book that they had specifically seen Aaron McKinney and Matthew together. Some go so far as to say that Aaron was openly bisexual and he and Matthew were lovers. Some go even further and say that Aaron McKinney joined Matthew in prostitution for methamphetamines. Others speculate that Aaron was Matthew's pimp in the prostitution for drugs business.
Okay.
And again, those things are backed up with 13 years worth of research. These aren't, I mean, everything I'm saying is alleged, but I'm not making it up.
Well, right. I just don't want, like, so this guy who's doing this, like, because you know you get that like where you have the victim who is obviously Matthew Shepard, and then like I don't want to like play into like, oh, they don't get an excuse for what they did.
You don't,
regardless of how the fuck you grew up. I don't give a shit what you did.
Everything that they have done,
like
everything that happened is not okay.
Right.
However, what the purpose, I think, and the value, and we'll get into some of this later, of the value of knowing this part of the story is it fleshes everybody out. Kind of like what you were talking about with fully fleshed out characters.
Totally.
It's not this homophobic
that they were just one thing.
Right. They weren't just one thing. There's a lot more there.
Right.
The truth most likely lies somewhere in between all the rumors, but regardless, one fact remains the same. The police did not investigate the killer's relationship to the gay community at all, and they largely ignored the fact that Matthew and his murderers actually knew each other and had some sort of relationship.
Right.
Flint Waters, our favorite, the officer who arrested Henderson, remains to this day convinced that this was not a homophobic hate crime. He was quoted as saying, "I believe to this day that McKinney and Henderson were trying to find Matthew's house so that they could steal his drugs. It was fairly well known in the Laramie community that McKinney wouldn't be the one that was striking out of a sense of homophobia. Some of the officers I worked with had caught him in a sexual act with another man, so it didn't fit. None of that made any sense to us."
Interesting.
Quote. So if this cop is to be believed, McKinney is certainly...
Well, all right. So here's the thing. I think that you can you can definitely still be a gay, hating, homophobic person and still
engage in sexual
acts with men and frequent gay bars, because that stems from a self-hate. That's like self-hatred from within yourself that you then project outwardly towards people. So just because, he, may have like I said, frequented, these gay bars or have been known or have been caught in sexual acts, like he could still 110% be a 3,000% homophobic douchebag.
Yeah.
And I don't know, that's interesting that you mentioned like the drugs, because, coming from a small town, I think we have an insight on this, because I know how a lot of people like in our hometown work and how they operate as far as like, I guess the correct term would be trade. But you have these guys who act very masculine, very straight, but are really like on the DL.
Yeah.
And I think that once you fuse like drugs into it, and then mix in that like self-hatred that's probably there a little bit, it's just like a really just nasty,
super
negative
volatile
cauldron of like volatile energy that can explode at any given moment.
Yeah.
Which is why like no.
So
and that's why you see like even in like the 80s, like when you have like trans people who were sex workers, and there are several instances of like these trans women who were murdered by the people that were engaging sexual activities with them.
Right.
It just all comes from a sense of self-hatred, like you're still homophobic or transphobic or whatever.
Right. Yeah. So Stephen Jimenez's own view, right? His thoughts on the motive. He was quoted as saying, "The view was that homophobic," and this is prior to the release of his research, "the view was that homophobic rednecks walked into a bar and saw an obviously gay man with money and targeted him and beat him to death for that reason. But that isn't what happened. Nothing in this book takes away from the iniquity and brutality of the crime or the culpability of Matthew's murderers. But we owe Matthew and other young men like him the truth. Aaron and Matthew had a friendship. They've been involved sexually. They bought and sold drugs from each other. That complicates the original story of two strangers walking into a bar and targeting Matthew, someone they did not know because he was gay."
Right.
And I think that he has a point, that we owe it to Matthew and to young men like him to tell the truth.
Right. That can also help out someone who might be in that situation,
Right.
because if you're telling the whole story,
Right.
like it doesn't just create it sort of breaks away that us versus them mentality.
Yes.
So it makes you realize that like as a gay person or transgendered or whatever, your enemy can be right there with you and you not know it. So it's not just a us versus them. That person can literally be holding your hand, looking at you, requesting sex from you.
And I think it says that as a member of the LGBTQ community, you can also commit hate crimes.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, nobody's above the law. You can, just like you were saying, you can, acting out of self-hate, commit a hate crime on somebody else.
Right. No, it's still a hate crime.
It just adds layers of complication to the case.
Right.
which life is complicated.
Yeah, and like I said, just reiterating, I just think my biggest takeaway from that is just like you never just be careful.
Always.
Just be careful, really. Like, don't get involved in anything you shouldn't be, unless of course it's witchcraft.
Just be good. Just sit at home, listen to podcasts.
Just sit at home, listen to podcasts, do some witchcraft, that sort of thing.
So we'll sort of wrap this case up. McKinney and Henderson were arrested, obviously, and initially charged with attempted murder, kidnapping, and aggravated robbery. Obviously, after Matthew passed, the charges were upgraded from attempted murder to first-degree murder, meaning that the two defendants were eligible for the death penalty. On April 5th of 1999, Russell Henderson accepted a plea deal to avoid going to trial, and he pled guilty to murder and kidnapping charges. And to escape the death penalty, Russell Henderson agreed to testify against Aaron McKinney, and he received a sentence of 2 life terms. So October to November of that same year, 1999, was Aaron McKinney's trial. And interestingly, the prosecutor for the case, Rerucha, I probably just murdered that name, Rerucha argued that the killing had been premeditated, driven by greed and violence, rather than by Matthew's sexual orientation. So the prosecutor in the case actually argued against it being a hate crime, which is interesting. McKinney's lawyer attempted to put forward a gay panic defense, arguing that McKinney was driven to temporary insanity by alleged sexual advances of Shepard.
Oh, my God.
The defense was quickly rejected by the judge.
Thank you.
The jury found...
Just imagine the judge being like, sir, sit down.
The jury found McKinney not guilty of premeditated murder, but guilty of felony murder. Shepard's parents made a deal resulting in McKinney receiving 2 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. Obviously, Stephen Jimenez's book has caused a lot of controversy in the LGBTQ community. Some people have praised it. John Stoltenberg is a gay rights activist and a longtime supporter of the Laramie Project, but he's also blogged really positively about the Book of Matt. He said, quote, "Keeping Matthew as the poster boy of gay hate crime and ignoring the full tragedy of this story has been the agenda of many gay movement leaders. Ignoring the tragedies of Matthew's life prior to his murder will do nothing to help young men in our community who are sold for sex, ravaged by drugs, and generally exploited.
Right.
They will remain invisible and lost."
Right.
And I think he's absolutely right.
Oh, yeah.
Ted Henson, a former lover and a friend of Matthew, believes that the Book of Matt is, quote, "nothing more than the truth," and that he was never certain that the murder was an anti-gay hate crime. He said, quote, "I don't know why there is so much hostility towards Steve," meaning Stephen Jimenez. "Matt would not have wanted to be seen as a martyr, but would have wanted the truth to come out." But on the opposite side of the coin, the Matthew Shepard Foundation is not in agreement. A statement that they issued in 2013 following the publication of Jimenez's book read, "We do not respond to innuendo, rumor, or conspiracy theories. Instead, we remain committed to honoring Matthew's memory and refuse to be intimidated by those who seek to tarnish it. We owe it to the tens of thousands of donors, activists, volunteers, and allies to the cause of equality who have made our work possible." However, Stephen Jimenez remains steadfast in defense of his research, despite all of the controversy that it has stirred up in the LGBTQ community. He said, quote, "To understand who Matthew really was, to alter our perception of him as a martyr and an icon, is not going to be damaging to gay rights. I don't buy it. I don't think we have anything to lose from telling the truth."
No.
And Stephen Jimenez, by the way, is an openly gay award-winning journalist.
You know, when you first mentioned that you were doing this topic, I was like,
Yeah.
Okay. Like I said, I admit that I had not, been fully exposed to the case. I knew, obviously I knew about it. I knew... And there were a couple of movies made, I believe, about it, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I kind of, had seen some of those, but, this was really interesting to hear because I think it, even in my mind, just thinking about it, I feel like I have gone from one perception of what or who, Matthew was to I don't know. It feels like it's expanded.
Right.
And I think there's definitely something important to be said about that, and that he, wasn't just a martyr, but, he had issues like a lot of other people do.
Everybody, yeah.
So, like, if you were stripping him away of the truth, then how can anybody else relate to that?
I think the issue...
what I mean? Or anyone else going through that. Or,
right.
like, you're taking away things that could be relatable.
Yeah, I think...
And making him a token.
And see, having studied theater, I've been subjected to the Laramie Project on many, many, many occasions, right? Lots of people love to pull monologues from that book. Lots of people love to audition with monologues from that book, or from that play. It's very well known, and it's very overdone. Don't do it if you're in theater school right now. However, I don't think that I really knew the full story until I started researching for the episode. And I didn't intend to do this case, but when I started reading all of this, it really stuck with me, because it's as though the people who are critical of this research and this telling of the story, it's as though they think that if we know that he had a problem with drugs, and we know that he was HIV positive at the time of his death, and we know that he maybe engaged in some kind of risky sexual activity, it's as though those people think that if that is part of our understanding of who this person was, that the crime is less heinous. That we'll think that he deserved it, that he deserved what he got, or that it's less of an awful thing that his life was snuffed out. And that's so not true. I mean, I think it's important to tell the story as close to the truth as it can be, because there are people out there who are exactly like Matthew right now. Right. And they need to hear his story. And everybody needs to hear that it's not an us and them thing, and that it's not a black and white thing, and that it's not, it's not that two strangers walked into a bar and targeted somebody because they thought that he was weak or whatever. There's so much more and so many more levels to it. And I think that, to be honest with you, the way that my understanding of the Matthew Shepard case from the Laramie Project was, obviously it's very sad and very upsetting. But I didn't think that it would be material that we would cover on our show, just because, it's the way it's presented there is very straightforward. Yeah. And what I wanted to do for this week was to kind of take a different approach to an LGBTQ case, and to kind of, bring some...
Well, and I think that, we recognize that some of these are, it's just, some of it is just alleged.
Yes,
right? Like,
absolutely.
It's just alleged.
Yeah. All of that is based on research that he carried out, and it's interviews that he had. So, I mean, that's why I think I probably said the word alleged a billion times.
You did. I mean, I think
we should call the episode alleged.
But it allows us to just sort of think differently about it and have more of an open mind about it, and open our perspectives to it. Like I said, which I think, again, just goes back to the whole theme of this episode is... we are more than
one
note. We're more than just that one letter in LGBTQ. Right. We're so much more than that. And we all have our issues, and we all have our demons, and that's what makes us beautiful, though. Right.
Well, that's what makes...
And that's what makes us strong. For me, it makes me strong.
Fully, like you were talking about, fully fleshed out characters. I mean... As people, we have, many facets, and some of them are not so bright and colorful and lovely. Some of them are black, very dark. Yeah.
Girl. Yes.
Most of my qualities are black and dark.
Black dress, black nails, black heart, absolutely. Black eyes.
Yeah, there you go. Mm-hmm. So. If it's dark enough black hair, girl. Yeah. So that's what we have for you. We hope that you got something out of this. We hope that it was a meaningful episode too, and we hope that we didn't, piss off the entire LGBTQ community.
I really don't want my LGBTQ card revoked, Katie.
Please no.
So, but yeah, just know that we love you guys, and definitely if you are out there and you love horror, and if you've got that story in you that you want to write, and you just know that you can just like
go for it,
fucking sell it, I need you to go for it, because we want to celebrate you. I want to see more. I want to see more horror shorts. I want to see more feature-length films. I want more.
Actually, what I would love to do is if you listen to our show and you write horror or are involved in horror or anything like that, or you know someone who is, we would love to kind of showcase LGBTQ horror pieces.
Yes,
like if you have a short story or a poem
even if it's
or a script.
Creepypasta, man.
Yeah, or a creepypasta, fucking anything. Just send it to us. You can email us at thehauntedheartpodcast@gmail.com. We'll share it on the show. We'll share it on our social media. You can tweet us at The Haunted Heart. Mm-hmm. You can Instagram us if you want to shoot us a DM. We're The Haunted Heart Podcast on Instagram. But yeah, send us your shit. If it's horror related or, I don't know, true crimey related, anything that you think we might like.
Yeah,
whatever.
Totally. We're down.
And we'll jive with that, especially since we have a bit more time left in June before the clock strikes midnight and all the awesome LGBTQ people turn into pumpkins. Just kidding.
Hey, I would love to turn into a pumpkin.
We go back to our secret lair.
I would love to turn into a pumpkin, please. Yeah. That's not a bad thing for me,
that's
bitch.
My dream. That's how I'm planning on
please,
ascending.
Please. There are some times in life I'm just like, please, can I just fucking be a pumpkin? Can I just
sitting on a hay bale?
Sitting on a fucking hay bale. Fucking fate, like smile carved right on in all the time. Happy or mad, however I want to be mad. For the rest of my life. I want to be a big mad pumpkin. That's fine with me if I want to live my life as big mad pumpkin.
Okay. On big mad pumpkin, I think we gotta close now.
All right, we'll close it out.
Come hang out with us. Oh, I forgot to say, come hang out with us on Facebook. We will also share some of the stuff that we get, some of the listener submissions that we get on our Facebook group, if we fucking get any. So search for the Haunted Heart Podcast. It's a closed group. If you ask to join it, we will fucking approve you, unless you are John Wayne Gacy, in which case we will not.
You better deny that before I will, because I will fucking not. I will approve.
Wait till we do an episode on him. He's such a dick. So, yes. And then Patreon, we're always Patreoning. We have some surprises coming up.
I know we've been saying that for a while, but like they're coming.
No, like we actually, we're not lying. Like there are things.
There are things. We're not lying. Fucking cool things.
So, yes. We will talk to you guys later, I reckon.
All right. And as always, stay spooky.